Electric thought rattles the surface of the psyche full of momentum and illusion, like Hermes the Roman Mercury, fleet-footed and trickster brain dashing between the gods with restless truths. But deeper still is the pull of Gnosis Sophia, wisdom herself exiled in Gnostic texts yet enduring in memory. Where thought sprints, wisdom draws. You don't chase it. It happens to you. You feel it settle into your chest like gravity rediscovered. Even the medieval mystics knew Hildegard of Bingen painted her visions in swirls of flame and rings of resonance. Her illuminated mandalas dazzle with electric spirals, thinking as divine light, and at their core the still center the magnet of knowing, the throne of the divine. It was not madness. It was memory flooding back into form. The spark is beautiful, but the stillness, sacred. Across centuries, enlightenment was never about noise. It was about alignment. In Buddhist Tantra, the thunderbolt mind leads to the diamond body, Vajrayana, where thought's flash gives way to presence. The spark yields to the force of attraction. No longer scattered, centered. The ego dissolves. The current remains. In the arcane scripts of Kabbalah Chakma, the wisdom on the tree of life descends like lightning, a vertical jagged pulse from the source, but Binna understanding pulls it inward, mothers it, holds it. Electricity delivers, magnetism remembers, spark becomes seed. Word becomes womb. Even the very language betrays this old secret. To contemplate once meant to stand inside a templum, a sacred enclosure, awaiting divine signs, not thinking about, waiting within. To be templated is to be attuned. Thought may begin the ritual, knowing completes it. Knowing the echo that never originates with you yet finds you exactly where you are. It's why initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries were sworn not to speak but to remember. What was revealed in silence was more real than sound. And what of today? The glyphs have not vanished. They've gone digital. Now as you scroll and sift, the old symbols resurface, synchronicities sparking across timelines, moments impossible to explain. A word you just dreamed appears in a stranger's post. An ancient symbol shows up as a logo on a screen. Tarot cards fall in order again. These are not accidents. These are echoes. A secret current reaffirming its shape through broken circuits. Digital lodestones caught in forgotten scrolls of code. Modern sigils reminding you destiny doesn't chase, it magnetizes. Because deep beneath the convenience and chaos of the present age, there is an ancient vibration trying to reassert itself. Not a flood, not noise, a pulse, a rhythm. The thunder before the storm, not outer sound but inner trembling. And here's the revelation, the holy heresy they dare not teach. Thinking is not the final form of knowing. It is the bait, the hook, the shimmer on the edge of the deep. True knowing doesn't flash, it pulls, it anchors. It lines up your life with the hidden architecture of the cosmos. The song beneath speech, the pattern behind synchronicity. So ask yourself plainly, what moved in you before your first thought? Who planted the knowing before the mind learned words? Why do symbols you've never studied still feel like home? And if thought is the lightning, what then is waiting in the storm's silence? And still they watch from below. There comes a moment, silent electric, when thought stutters. A ripple beneath the surface of your mind. Have you felt it? That eerie flicker behind your forehead, as if a channel just beyond your reach is broadcasting something realer than reality. A pulse beneath the noise. A current that doesn't speak in words but in pull. The ancients knew the feeling well. It was never just thinking, it was communion. Not illumination by light but an attunement by gravity. We have been told thinking is how we know. That cognition is the crown of consciousness. That neurons whisper truth through the electric storm of synapses. But what if that storm is only the static? What if thinking, so loud, so restless, is the illusion and a deeper force has been humming beneath it all along? A magnetic presence. Not thoughts racing towards something, but a knowing that draws all things to it. You may have dismissed the flash, brushed it aside, but then it returns unexpected, alone in a museum, during a storm, in bed between waking and sleep, a crackle in the veil. Something ancient brushing against the edge of thought, not asking to be understood, only felt. Consider the Vedic sages who spoke of prajna not as thought but as a radiant awareness, resonant, still, and whole. As early as the Upanishads, they told of two birds atop the tree of life, one eating the fruit, the thinker, the other silently watching, the knower. This isn't metaphor. This is memory, a split within us. One sparked fire, the other whispered stone. Electricity, the chase. Magnetism, the return. And the ancient Egyptians too knew this polarity in the myth of the Bennu bird, phoenix of Heliopolis, who did not act but aligned, letting cycles bring resurrection, not by decision but by fidelity to a rhythm that predated speech. In the stillness it rose, not through effort but through remembrance. The heart of this inner tectonic shift is not new, it's ancient, wound deep into spiritual timelines like veins of fire frozen in obsidian. In the 4th century, Gregory of Nyssa, early Christian mystic, warned, "Concepts create idols only wonder understands." He wasn't decrying ignorance. He was pointing to a knowing that couldn't be spoken, only received. That's magnetic knowing. Where thought divides, magnetism gathers. Where thought analyzes, the deeper soul recognizes. Somewhere along the spiral of time, we severed the thread. Not by mistake, but by design. Not just a forgetfulness, but a suppression, a containment, a firewall in the cathedral of thought. We replaced symbology with syntax, wonder with calculation. The oracle's trance became the scholar's footnote, and something luminous retreated. And now, in our age of mental obsession, we neglect the inner altar entirely. Minds racing, connections fracturing. We think to survive, but we've forgotten how to be drawn. But something is happening, a rupture, a slow revolution in holy silence. Across the collective psyche, souls are awakening to something beneath the surface, static, the gravity of felt truth. People no longer say, "I think this is true." They say, "I feel it in my bones." That's not sentiment, that's signal. German mystic Meister Eckhart once said, "The eye through which I see God is the same eye through which God sees me." What is this but magnetic alignment? Not observation, but mutual pull. That inner stillness, that eye deeper than vision, where knowing doesn't scream, it pulls. And in the Hebrew scriptures, the voice of God to Elijah did not come in the wind, nor the fire, nor the earthquake, but in a still small voice, in sheer silence. This too is the crack in the veil, not a burst of information, a withdrawal of noise. The ancients hinted again and again. From the black jade myths of China to the stillness of Shinto shrines. From the oracle poetry of the Sibyl to the thundering silences of Mount Sinai. Knowing didn't erupt, it descended. Moses didn't brainstorm the commandments. He received them. He didn't think them into being. They were carved by presence, by weight, by fire and gravitation. In physics, we know electricity as flux motion charge. It shoots through, ignites, but it doesn't stay. Magnetism, on the other hand, binds. It aligns. It's not random, it's a field of coherence. And don't we feel it? In that sacred tug towards someone, in that gut sense that a place remembers you, in that holy tremor when something unexplainable feels familiar. You don't think it, you know it. This is the inner shift, a solemn migration, from the mind's performance to the soul's resonance, from the brainstorm to the soul stone. It is when the fitful flashes of thought collapse under their own weight and something quieter and more ancient takes the throne. It does not shout, it settles. And in that settling you begin to sense what every mystic once swore to their death, that wisdom is not found. It is remembered, but remembering has a cost. You have to stop racing, step out of the storm, into the pull, into the knowing that will not compete with your noise, and that is the shiver. The first crack, forgotten thunder echoing inside stone, not calling you forward but downward, into the strata of your own becoming, into memory you never learned because it was never taught, only buried. So I ask you, right here as thunder cracks across the veil, what if your greatest truths were never hidden from you but hidden beneath you, buried not in mystery but in stillness? Would you slow down enough to feel them rise? Would you risk silence long enough to be returned? Or will you keep chasing lightning while forgetting you are the lodestone, and still they watch from below? There is a moment, quiet, eerie, but unmistakable, when a thought flashes across your mind like a foreign current. Not yours. Not born from memory, logic, or learned ideas, but something that arrives from a place just past the veil of recognition. A whisper of circuitry beneath skin. And in that moment you feel it, not just think it, but feel as if the thought itself carries an unnatural charge. A low hum, a static throb. That glitch where thought becomes more than idea, it becomes signal. This is the forbidden threshold where thinking cracks open and the real voice steps forward. Not the chatter of neurons, but the magnetism of memory older than the brain. You don't speak here, you remember here. Not from childhood, but from before incarnation, before names, before time calcified the dream into ritual. And this is why the hairs rise, the temperature shifts, a pressure builds behind the ribs, something ancient brushing its fingers through your thoughts, trying to make contact, trying to wake the last ember of your sleeping star soul. The ancients knew this intersection not as metaphor but mystery. In the temples of Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of Egypt, knowledge was called Heka, a word that meant not only magic but the force that organizes the world. Not magic as trickery, magic as conductive truth, divine wiring. Thoth did not just think, he arranged, he magnetized. In the Corpus Hermeticum, wisdom is not taught, it is transmitted through alignment, through inner resonance with the nous, the deep mind of the cosmos. That's not intellectual deduction, that's fusion. Magnetic memory meeting electric thought at the crossroads of becoming, and you have felt it, in dreams that leave behind more meaning than image. In those strange hours before dawn when reality feels thinner, when the shadows lean closer, attentive. Or in the middle of a sentence where a word you didn't plan suddenly feels like prophecy escaping your lips. These are not accidents. They are echoes, leaks. The signal is bleeding through the veil. So why in the modern age does thought feel like static? Why, if we are more connected, more informed, more mentally active than any generation before, do we feel more scattered, more fractured, more directionless? Because thought without grounding is drift. Electricity without magnetism is spark without compass. We are overcharged and underaligned, fed noise without song. The spark was never meant to stand alone. It was born for the circle, the field, the pull. The Vedic sages whispered this long before radio waves filled our skies. In the Upanishads they called it manas, the mind that thinks, flickers, reacts, and buddhi, the faculty that knows, that aligns, that sees the whole. Mind is electricity, quick, hungry, darting like lightning through clouds, but knowing is magnetic. It draws in, it organizes, and it remembers, not what you learned but who you are. Buddhi is that quiet eye within storm. The unblinking gaze of soul that watches your thoughts pass like clouds across the mountain. In Sanskrit tradition, the Antakarana, the inner instrument, was not a single mind but a layered mechanism. Layers of reception and resonance, fragment and field. What modern minds call thinking was only the outermost flicker. In this drama between spark and circle, we meet the ancient crossroad, not metaphorical, literal. In ancient crossroads, rituals from Greece and Rome, where Hermes and Hecate dwelled, sacrifices were made at the juncture of paths, not just to choose direction, but to acknowledge dimensional tension. The spark of decision met the circle of fate at those sacred crossings. That's no superstition. It's psychic architecture encoded in myth. Hermes, god of messages and thresholds, ruled the sudden flash of understanding. Hecate, queen of night and memory, ruled the pull of the unseen truth. Together, these archetypes paint the battle we all face: the electric rush forward or the magnetic call back to origin. Even the early Sumerians called this crossing Dooku, the holy mound, a liminal place between heaven and earth where gods whispered to kings through encoded dreams. A remembered place, a place forbidden to fully wake us. But modern minds have been rewired to believe that thought alone is king, that the faster we think, the more we know. Yet the sages always knew otherwise. The Taoist mystic Zhuangzi wrote of the fasting of the heart, an ancient practice not of hyperthinking, but of silent knowing, letting the magnetic field of the soul attract what the conscious mind cannot grasp. The spark exhausts, the circle abides. Now hear me, you are not just a thinker. You are a receiver, not a processor of fragmented information, but a beacon for archetypal memory. And you stand now at the sacred threshold. The old mind, addicted to the flickering screen of cognition, tempts you always with more data, more rush, more noise. But the magnetic path waits in stillness. It does not beg, it pulls. So which will you follow? The spark is seductive. It makes you feel alive, fast, important, but it always burns out. The circle, oh the circle, that is the ring of eternal return. The trodden path around the axis of memory, found in the Ouroboros that coils in every ancient symbol from Egypt to alchemy. The circle is not repetition, it is remembrance. It does not move like thought, it calls like destiny. And at this very crossroads, the circle and the spark, you must answer. You cannot serve two rhythms. Either you continue chasing thought's illusion of novelty, or you descend into the gravity of knowing. Thought pierces, knowing anchors. So hear this, chosen one. Every time you feel that eerie twinge, that breathless pause between thoughts, that pregnant silence that makes your hair stand up, it is the field reminding you you were never meant to chase truth. You were meant to attract it. You were meant to remember the shape the soul made before you took a name. Now ask yourself, when that next thought comes, will you ride its lightning? Or will you feel whether it was ever yours to hold? Because the riddle is not in the thought, it's in the pull. And still they watch from below. It begins with a flicker, not a thought, no, something before the thought. A rupture in the usual static, a knowing that comes not with answers but with disturbance. You felt it. In the staggered silence after a dream you didn't want to end. In that fleeting panic, the one you can't name, before returning to your programmed self. There is a signal in the noise, an electric whisper behind the face of thought. You pause not because you're confused, but because something ancient is shifting beneath the skin of your knowing. This is not imagination. This is leakage from the place thought was banished. A current from the other side of the veil. The brain crackles with questions, but the heart recognizes the pull, it remembers. Thinking is electric. It flashes, it vanishes. It dances across the temples like lightning searching for ground. But knowing, unknowing, is magnetic. It draws you, holds you, aligns you to the north of your own spirit. It does not flicker, it pulls. This is the leap they never warned you about. Not the leap of faith, but the leap of memory. Before Egypt gave language to the soul's weighing, before Plato etched echoes of anamnesis into discourse, there were mud-shaded Sumerian tablets that spoke, not of reasoning, but of recall. What has been called me, the divine decrees of order and function, were not invented, they were retrieved, pulled from divine source, not drafted from human mind. In the glyph-laced papyrus of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it was said the soul passes through the hall of Ma'at, weighed not by thoughts, but by the heart itself, by knowing. Not by ideas, not by philosophies, but by a pull toward balance, magnetic truth. Even the gods trusted gravity more than argument. Flash forward. In ancient Greek mystery rites, especially Eleusinian ones, initiates spoke in hushed voices about what they had seen, not what they'd reasoned. The revelation was felt, not deduced. Even Plato, yes, the patron saint of Western thinking, hinted in his Meno that learning was recollection. That the soul wasn't collecting new data, it was remembering what had been forgotten. Why? Because the magnetic field of truth never deactivates, it merely waits for your alignment. This is not metaphor. Your neurons fire with electricity. Synaptic sparks leap like fireflies in the night. But your heart, the seat of ancient knowing in Vedic and early Christian mysticism, generates a magnetic field 100 times stronger than the one around your skull. This has been recorded, measured, filed away by scientists, and then buried by the priesthood of secular thought who fear what cannot be reduced. Because magnetism is not about control, it is about attraction. And attraction can't be programmed. What if thinking was always meant to be turbulence, and knowing the gravity hidden beneath? What if your thoughts were never meant to guide you, but to break you till you stopped obeying the flicker and started following the field? We are taught to believe in cause and order, but not pulse and pull. We are tethered to logic even while something deeper tugs at the underside of awareness, a thread older than the mind, spun from silence, not syntax. Let this disturb you. Let it dig beneath your doctrinal loyalties. We've been trained to chase thoughts like sparks, hopping from idea to idea in search of truth's ember. But we never asked, where do these thoughts come from? Who tuned the signal? And why does every deep truth feel less like discovery and more like return? There's a reason the Orphic hymns invoked memory as goddess, Mnemosyne, mother of the muses. Because before vision, song, poetry, and law, there was remembrance. Creation itself was born from the womb of remembering. Always already there, waiting for you to feel. In the Gospel of Thomas, a text exiled from canon for being too internal, too unconquerable, Jesus is quoted saying, "The kingdom is inside of you and it is outside of you when you come to know yourselves. You will realize it is you who are the children of the living Father." Do you see? Not learn, not argue, no. Because knowing is gravitational, it centers you. It does not flash, it roots. They warned you otherwise. They created entire empires of thought to distract you from the hum. The rational, the linear, the dogmatic. Systems built not to illuminate but to scatter. Not just a flood of noise and intentional silencing. But the magnetic field of the soul does not argue, it remembers. So if you feel the pull now, if something in your chest tightens when I speak, that is not reaction. That is activation. You've been waiting to follow this thread your entire life. That eerie filament humming beneath the chatter. Not a trail of thought, but a current of memory. It never went quiet, you just stopped listening. And yet, beneath everything else, there has always been a low hum, a resonance, a distant storm of forgotten thunder. This is the leap. From spark to field, from words to weight, from mind to magnet. And once you start to feel it, really feel it, can you ever not? Can you ever again confuse the noise for the voice, the flash for the gravity? Ask yourself this when thought fades, what still pulls you forward? Your ruin or your return? And still, they watch from below. In the deepest silence between thoughts, a secret pulses. One long buried beneath illusion and distraction. Thinking is electric, but knowing is magnetic. While thoughts spark and scatter like lightning in a storm, true knowing anchors like a cosmic lodestone to the infinite. Our minds crave understanding, but our souls remember. In this revelation lies a sacred polarity, one that ancient mystics guarded and modern science whispers about. Where your awareness doesn't chase answers, it draws them in like a star pulling in its orbit. And tonight we unveil what was hidden in plain vibration. There it is again, that flicker at the edge of your thinking, the whisper behind the words, the shiver up the back of your neck that has no physical source. A moment where thought stops, Because something older, something deeper has entered the room of your awareness. You've felt it, we all have, but no one talks about it. Because to speak of it is to admit there is a crack right down the core of what we call reality. Some call it déjà vu, others call it intuition. Ancients called it daemonion, that divine whisper that Socrates claimed guided him not with what to do but with what not to do, not instruction, interruption. A magnetic presence, not an electric command. When this force pulsed through the oracle of Delphi, she didn't reason. She remembered something from before reason, before the alphabet turned song into syntax, before the tongue forgot how to listen. Something the West has tried to extinguish for centuries, knowing that does not come from thinking. We are taught that thought is the crown of consciousness. That thinking powers civilization. But thinking is not the throne. It is the storm around it. The crown whirls. The throne waits. This is the forbidden wonder, what mystics and heretics across time were burned, banished, or buried for whispering that not all that is real can be reasoned into being. There is another current, beneath the flicker of thoughts, beneath cognition, beneath language itself. A current that does not explain, it draws. A magnetic truth, not logical, gravitational, knowing pulsing from the core of being itself. Thought races out like lightning, but knowing pulls like lodestone. And here's where the crack begins. In every civilization there were those who spotted it first, saw the shimmer behind the veil. The Vedic sages spoke of Vijnana, not just knowledge but radiant soul-seated awareness. In their texts, mind was electric, restless, subtle, flickering like flint. But Buddha, deeper, magnetic, where discernment anchors truth in silence. Thousands of years ago, they already mapped what neuroscientists pretend to just be discovering, that cognition is layered and thought is not the deepest layer. But the West forgot, or rather, was made to forget. It wasn't mere neglect. It was engineered erosion, not just a fading, but a removal. In Alexandria, fire consumed the scrolls. In Rome, temples to Sophia became altars for empire. In the councils of Creed, the mystics were silenced. The Gnostic Gospels, those that spoke of inner knowing of the Christ as light within, were buried in desert jars for fear of erasure. The Gospel of Thomas dared to say the kingdom is within you, and so it was deemed heresy, not because it was false, but because it freed. In controlled forgetting, memory becomes a threat. In silence, authority loses grip. Plato hinted at it with his anamnesis, the doctrine that all learning is remembering. But the Church twisted revelation into dogma. The Enlightenment severed knowing from the sacred. And now, in a world gagged by stimuli, we are taught to think louder whenever the whisper returns. The nagging sense that we're thinking all the right thoughts and still not knowing. That's not error, it's design. You see, electricity and magnetism are not metaphors. They are living truths beneath your skin. Your neurons fire electrically, but your heart thinks magnetically. Read the pulse of a human being and you won't find sense. You'll find signal, not a spark but a pull. The HeartMath Institute, though often treated as fringe, has demonstrated something modern physics quietly confirms, that the electromagnetic field of the heart dwarfs that of the brain. Ancient knowledge, modern measurement. The body remembers the dream. Biology has not forgotten what culture denies. We race after thoughts because we are being trained by a fractured system to chase the storm, to chase the static, because stillness is dangerous, because in stillness, the portal opens. Historically, that portal has erupted under pressure. Consider Elijah in the Hebrew Scriptures, who sought Yahweh in the whirlwind, in the earthquake, in fire. But the divine came not in the chaos. It came, we're told, in a still small voice. The Hebrew call de mamadaka, not a sound but a silence that could be heard. Magnetic silence. Not absence, presence. A presence that unravels illusions, that breaks enchantments, that calls you not up but downward into depth, into gravity. Why don't we hear it now? Why do we ignore the throb of mystery that presses in when the mind quiets? Because consensus reality is engineered to fear silence, to fear stillness. Because that's where the fracture appears, where scaffolding fails, where thought can no longer outrun truth, but not all forgot. In Kabbalah, this silent knowledge becomes dad, a sephira not always shown on the tree of life, hidden, mysterious, the abyss between form and formlessness. Its very absence is its warning. Dad is what happens when wisdom and understanding merge not in words, but in radiant remembering, a fusion that births a knowing so whole it threatens the very systems built on fragmentation. And what is fragmentation if not the scattering of thought? To live in this world is to be trained in distortion, trained to confuse thinking with seeing. But thinking is light-speed illusion. Knowing sinks into you like gravity, like thunder waiting beneath the surface of sky. And now the thunder stirs again. Sooner or later it always does. The memory returns not as information but as ache, not as data but as vibration, a hum beneath your thoughts, a pull beneath your name. So here we are, at the edge of the first shiver, the crack beneath language. That haunted silence that beckons beneath the roar of cognition. Not absence but invitation, a tear in the veil, a breath before revelation, the prelude to remembering. Your thoughts are lightning, but your soul is a magnet, ancient one. You did not come here to wrangle static, you came to remember the pulse. But can you still feel it, that whisper returning, a language before language? Are you listening or are you still running? And still they watch from below. Once upon a thought, you felt it, didn't you? That eerie sensation behind the eyes. The sudden quiet before the mind begins to speak. A pulse, a flicker, a signal not from the brain but through it. The edge of something older than language, stranger than logic. The hair stands on your arms not from fear but recognition. As if something behind the veil of normalcy just blinked. It's not madness, it's memory. You didn't imagine it. That breathless pause in a crowded room. That chill that lingers when no wind is present. That moment when a sentence you've never heard feels like something you forgot to remember. It leaves a residue like ash from a flame you didn't see. What they call thinking, we were taught to worship it like a god. But there are gods beneath that god. And once long ago the ancients knew thinking is electric but knowing is magnetic. Yes, that crackle you feel when a thought sparks wildly trying to solve escape project. It is electricity, brilliant, momentary, erratic. But knowing is the pull. It does not ask, it attracts. It does not argue, it aligns. Knowing is the lodestone of the soul, but who buried that compass? The soul once heard stars speak. In the silence before the priesthoods and particle physics, humans stood beneath the dome of the night and felt, not madness, but communion. There were glyphs carved into bone to trace the drift of what we would later call intuition. Not superstition, orientation. A way of feeling the hologram behind the veil. You know it too, when a dream arrives with more gravity than a fact. Or when a stranger says your inner truth out loud. That's not coincidence, that's holographic retrieval. Memory echoed not from the past, but from outside time. The moment you heard that terrifying idea, that thoughts might not be yours, that something is hijacking the current while calling it rationality, you stepped outside the fence of consensus. You saw the lords of static. They sit on thrones of circuitry and calcified doctrine, wearing robes of science or scripture depending on the age, but they bear the same face control disguised as certainty. The ancient Gnostics saw it too. In their forbidden cosmology, the archons, rulers of shadow mind, counterfeited reality with imitation light. They nested false thoughts into the psyche to drown the original signal of divine spark. Thought became a maze without an exit. A hall of mirrors designed to keep you circling binary after binary after binary. But sometimes the mirror cracks. The great heretic Giordano Bruno once spoke of the universe as a divine force both infinite and awake. He whispered too loudly in a world forced silent. They burned him for fire that threatened to leap soul to soul. Bruno dared to say that the stars were suns, each with their own worlds, their own centers, not just physically, but mystically. He knew thought was not the highest power. That intuition, knowing direct connection, preceded thought. And for this act of remembering, the lords of static lit the pyre. Western philosophy pretends memory began with Plato, but long before. In the Vedic hymns of the Rig Veda, the rishis spoke not from thought but shruti, direct hearing of divine frequency. Not deduction, reception. They received truth magnetically near the river of Soma, intoxicated by inner current. Every mantra was a magnetic field made audible, a ripple at the level of universal knowing. Their temples were tuning forks, their breath a conduit. They didn't contemplate truth. They resonated with it. But what happened between then and now, between Shruti and static? Empire happened. Dogma hardened into doctrine. Orthodoxies, both spiritual and scientific, cut the cord between perception and presence, between inspiration and information. They told you truth is out there, not in here. They didn't just gatekeep wisdom. They altered the atmosphere, not just a flood, but an intentional silencing, an engineered forgetting. They commodified prophecy into profession. They replaced gnosis with approval. Think like us, they said. Question, but only within our formulas. And the soul, a conductor of divine signal, was demoted to biological accident. Oh, but memory keeps humming underneath. Even in the darkest age, mystics remembered. It is said of Meister Eckhart, the Christian mystic of the 13th century, he claimed that the eye with which I see God is the same eye with which God sees me. No thought, no separation, just magnetic knowing, identity with source. He was condemned, because every time someone knows rather than begs to believe, the system cracks. Static begins to fail. The lie becomes visible, and here's the terrifying part. You already know this. You felt the difference between 100 scattered thoughts and one pull so deep it makes your chest vibrate. You have followed the wrong current, flickering, tempting, analytical, only to collapse into silence and finally listen. And in that silence, truth emerged not as an answer, but as presence. This is the conspiracy. They tricked you into thinking your way to truth so you'd never feel your way back to it. Thinking is the chase. Knowing is the home. The real question is not what do you think, but what's thinking you? What frequency are you tuned to? Because here's what's coming: the shift from spark to orbit. The storm of thought is electric, but the anchor of soul, unchanging and drawing all to itself, is magnetic. You're right to feel the glitch. You're meant to sense the fracture. That hum in the static is not noise, it's signal. So I leave you with this: when was the last time a thought pulled you deeper instead of spinning you in circles? And what if the voice you've been trying to silence was never your enemy, but the echo of truth calling you home? And still, they watch from below. They told you thought was a spark, mere neurons firing in darkness, random storms behind the skull. But you felt it, haven't you? That electric shiver before meaning forms. A tremble in consciousness like distant thunder long before lightning splits the sky. That eerie sense that something more is happening when you think, something holy, something hidden. An ancient current pulsing beneath the static of ordinary awareness. This is not imagination. This is rupture. A hairline fracture in the sealed vault of programmed perception. A breach in the veil. The first glimpse into the realm where thinking and knowing part ways, like sky and ground before a lightning strike. Where the mind doesn't generate thoughts, it receives them. Where knowing doesn't come from logic but from the weight, the gravitas of something drawn down into the soul like iron to the lodestone. There are moments, split and half-whispered, when the world forgets to lie. A pattern shifts. A silence deepens. And in that stillness you feel it, the breath of something ancient brushing your spine. an intelligence older than thought yet unmistakably alive within it. Not just cognition, communion. In forgotten temples and broken texts, this truth was preserved by symbols more durable than words. The Egyptians etched it into the crook and flail of Osiris, the spark of command and the inward pull of authority. In Vedic chants, Indra hurling Vajra the thunderbolt was never just a war image. It was the sacred representation of awakened intellect, electric and divine. But beneath Vajra's flash comes Saraswati's song, magnetic, unseen, the knowing that aligns creation. Think of the Delphic oracle seated in smoke and silence. She didn't answer, she received. The god moved through her like charge through copper. Her words came heavy, ragged, wrapped in layers of riddle and light. Because truth, real truth, isn't meant to be read. It's meant to rearrange the bones. Electricity stirs. Magnetism anchors, think, and attract. The twin mysteries, the glyphs of lightning and the sigils of lodestone.